All right, so let's go ahead and start this lecture on the Spanish colonial Texas. So what we're going to be looking at, how the Spanish used missions to colonize Texas. All right, so if you go through in the 16 and 1700s, there were four countries that competed for control in the Americas. That's France, England, the Netherlands, and Spain. They differed or clashed over religion, property, riches, and power. And most of their battles started in Europe, but extended to the colonies. Out of these, we're going to primarily look at France and Spain when we talk about Texas history. All right, so missions in Texas, you have a mission presidio system. And as you see, it's used by the Spanish to gain control in other parts of the New World. A mission, here's the definition. A mission was a settlement set up in Indian territory. Friars are members of the clergy who belonged to religious groups invited Indians to live at the missions. The friars taught them about Christianity, the language and customs of Spain, and Spanish farming methods. In the 1600s, Spain began building missions in Texas. Missions were a standard part of Spain's colonization process. So there were three things about these Spanish missions. They were built to establish control over Texas. They also were built to help populate Texas. They were used to teach the natives of the Native Americans the Spanish language and the way of life, and also to convert them to Catholicism. So the three things, when you look at it, let's highlight this. There were three things that they were trying to accomplish with the missions. They were trying to get them to speak the Spanish language, teach Native Americans the way of life, and convert Native Americans to Catholicism. So teach Native Americans Spanish language, teach them the way of life, and convert them to Catholicism. All right, so let's look at presidios. Think about this. What is a presidio? With the discontent in Europe over Texas in the New World, Spain was uneasy to leave their colonies undefended. When LaSalle established Fort St. Louis and claimed it for France, the Spanish decided it was time to protect their claim. They would build missions with military outposts called presidios. So a presidio is a military outpost that protected a Spanish mission. There we go. Here's some information I want to bring to your knowledge. When you look at all of these missions and something that they mainly had in common, most of them were built in close proximity to rivers because, as you guys know, it's very important to have a source of water for food, drinking, cleaning, and all type of purposes like that. Let's go to the purpose of missions, which, you know, we kind of talked about this already. The purpose of these missions was to make a profit for Spain, produce goods for export. They wanted the mission to be self-supported. That means that the Native Americans would grow and make supplies and food for themselves. Here's the primary one: convert Native people to Catholicism. They wanted them to be Catholics. The more missions, Texas would eventually become more Spanish. So the idea was, if we build more missions and we get more Native Americans in these missions, then the state of, well, the area of Texas would become more Spanish. It wasn't Texas at the time, though. All right, so let's look at it. The first mission in Texas. What was the first mission in Texas? So the first mission in Texas was built in 1682. And that mission is Corpus Christi de la Isleta amongst the Tagoa people near El Paso. It's in El Paso, Texas, not in Corpus Christi. That's a different city. It's in El Paso, Corpus Christi de la Isleta. Mission Mission Corpus Christi de la Isleta in 1682. It is the first permanent European settlement in Texas. Had the most Spanish activity in East Texas. The fear of the French settlements led to an increase in the building of mission presidios and towns out in East Texas. When they learned of LaSalle's fort, and they sent Alonso de Leon to destroy it. Spanish missions in the east in East Texas. There weren't any settlers in East Texas. LaSalle arrival turned Spain's attentions and efforts to East Texas. So let's look at Mission San Francisco de los Tejas. So in 1619, Father Damien Massonet sought to have the first mission built in East Texas. Here's what he faced as troubles: drought, disease, and rejection of the Catholic faith by Native Americans. Also, the French were no longer a threat, therefore the mission was abandoned. After the failure of the mission, Francis St. Denis expressed interest in trading with the native Texans. As a result, Spain began building a new mission in Texas. So here we go. France threatens again. See, France is primarily in the Americas to trade furs and other goods with Native Americans. They're not as focused on like settling Texas, putting a lot of French people in these areas. They're primarily focused on trading. So in 1699, the French established a colony along the mouth of the Mississippi River. Once you guys see, once again, kind of to prove the point, the French are not interested in taking Indian territory or converting them to Catholicism. Their primarily focus was trading blankets, guns, wines for furs and skins. They hoped to trade with Spanish merchants in Mexico, but Spanish law prohibited foreigners from trading in Spanish colonies. Father Hidalgo, the Spanish priest, asked France to establish a mission amongst Texas. French offered as an opening for trade. Louis St. Denis sent to negotiate with Spain. Captain Diego Ramon, alarmed at the unexpected arrival of French at St. Denis, arrested, but late allowed to escort Spanish to East Texas. Okay, Mission San Juan Bautista. So from 1693 to 1714, Spain made no efforts to settle Texas, but settlements along the Rio Grande grew quickly. Mission San Juan Bautista was built in 1699, 5 miles from the Rio Grande, near several crossings that allow for easy access to Texas. The mission eventually grew into a complex of 3 missions, a presidio, and a town. The mission was called the Mother of Texas Missions because it was the base for any expeditions to establish missions in East Texas. This mission provided grain, cattle, and horses to missionaries. So let's look at it. Why did the missions in East Texas fail? All right, the Native Americans in East Texas never took to the idea of Christianity. They didn't want to convert to Christianity. Spanish soldiers treated the Native Americans harshly. Native Americans or Native Texans died of many of the diseases. Floods destroyed native crops. The natives blamed all of these terrible events on the Spanish. They viewed the Spanish as evil and bad luck, and they felt like the Spanish were plotting to kill them. Therefore, the Spanish abandoned the missions and they began to head west. All right, so another mission we're going to look at is Los Ades, Spanish capital of the province of Texas. Its purpose was to help Spain keep an eye on the French activity in the area. It was only 15 miles from French settlement of Nacogdoches. All right, so there was a brief skirmish or a conflict called the Chicken War. So in 1719, Spain and France were at war in Europe. Tension spread to the New World. Spanish missions in East Texas had few soldiers to protect them against French soldiers. French soldiers raided the mission of Los Ades. It's called the Chicken War. The French only found what? Chickens. So there wasn't anyone in the mission except chickens. They took the chickens. The squawking chickens startled the French soldiers' horses. In the confusion, a mission priest escaped and reported the attack. People referred to it as the Chicken War. Results was that the Spanish panic retreated to San Antonio de Valero and abandoned East Texas missions again. So let's go ahead and look at San Antonio de Valero, which was created in 1718. So the Spanish picked an area on the San Antonio River and built a mission, San Antonio de Valero, as a good halfway point between the Rio Grande and East Texas to stock and send supplies. So you guys see the Rio Grande was very important to the Spanish. The site offered many benefits: location, scenery, abundance of water and fish. They built the Presidio San Antonio de Bear nearby. This became known as the Alamo. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the missions in Central Texas. Spanish missions faced raids by plain tribes. Cattle and horses were constantly stolen. In 1749, the Lipan Apache and the Spanish made peace. The Lipans agreed to convert to Christianity or Catholicism if the Spanish would protect them from the Comanches. The Spanish built the mission/presidio for the Lipans, Mission Santa Cruz de San Saba. The Spanish did not know that the mission they created was in Comanche territory. The Lipans hoped to start a war between the Spanish and the Comanche. Why do you guys think that the Lipans wanted to do that? Do you think they wanted to weaken the Comanche? The Lipan Apache never really lived at the mission. This mission was a failure. So in 1758, about 2,000 Comanches, comprised of the Wichitas and the Tonkawas, burned down the mission and killed most of the missionaries. The mission failed and all sides remained hostile. Missionaries had less success with the Plains tribes. So let's look at actual life within the missions. So as far as the Native Americans and how they had to fare within the missions, Native Americans were kept busy from sunup to sundown. Each day started early with prayer. Children attended school. Women wove clothes, molded pottery, and cooked. Men farmed, learned carpentry or blacksmithing. After dinner were more religious classes followed by prayer. Food was plentiful with herds of cattle, sheep, and goats, guaranteeing a regular supply of meat and milk. Farming was popular, including the farming of corn, beans, cantaloupes, cucumbers, watermelon, peppers, peaches, and sweet potatoes. Although some Native Americans adapted to mission life, most refused to stay at the missions permanently. So, in order to protect the missions, the Spanish had to hire soldiers. So let's look at the soldiers' duty. So the soldiers' duty included protecting the missions and nearby settlements, maintaining control over the Native Americans in the missions, and scouting the land for intruders. So these soldiers were very much so like police. Most of the soldiers were also settlers who had brought their families to the military towns, and soldiers for a living. Military men were poorly equipped and lived in poor conditions. They sometimes traded with the Native Americans living in the missions, usually unfairly. Living in Spanish Texas. Living in Spanish Texas, mainly farmers irrigated fields through the elaborate system of canals. A lot of ranchers, you had shopkeepers, barbers, tax collectors, servants, tailors, blacksmith. Population. So the population consisted of Spaniards, Native Americans, mestizos, which is a mixture of people who were mixed with Spanish and Native American ancestry. So you have the development of the Tejano heritage. So a Tejano is a person of Mexican heritage who considers Texas his or her home. So this last part, we're going to look at significant individuals to colonize the mission system. Fray Damien Massenet. So Fray Damien Massenet was a Catholic Church official. This man was convinced that the viceroys of New Spain to colonize East Texas and convert the Catos to Catholicism. Founder of the first Spanish mission in East Texas, the Mission San Francisco de los Tejas. Due to a lack of interest by the Native Americans to convert and many dying of disease, the mission was abandoned. They helped colonize the land of Tejas along the Neches River. Mission Santa Maria. Jose de Escavan. He is known as the colonizer and the first governor of the colony of Nueve Santander, which is in Laredo. By 1748, he was made governor and captain general of Nuevo Santander and began establishing settlements along the Rio Grande River. In 1755, he granted permission to Thomas Sanchez de la Barrera y Garza to found Laredo, the largest and most successful permanent Spanish settlement in South Texas. Antonio Magril de Jesus. During the Chicken War of 1719, a war fought between Spain and France, the 6 missions and presidios in East Texas were all abandoned. The entire Spanish population withdrew from San Antonio. The following February, Magril decided to rebuild and found San Jose y San Miguel de Aguayo, which became the most successful of all Spanish missions. Okay, the next person we have is Father Francisco Hidalgo. In 1711, Spanish missionary Father Francisco Hidalgo wanted to build more missions in East Texas among the Caddo Indians. He begged Spanish officials to rebuild the mission for Tejas people he had known for over 10 years. Desperate, Hidalgo wrote a letter to the French governor in Louisiana asking the French to help build a mission amongst Tejas. The letter was sent in secret without the Spanish officials' permission. The French governor liked Hidalgo's proposal as it offered an opportunity to open trade with the Native American people and Spanish settlements. He appointed Louis de Saint Denis to negotiate with Spanish officials. Louis de Saint Denis, experienced explorer sent to find Father Hidalgo. On the way to the Rio Grande, he built a trading post in Nacogdoches at the Red River. He traveled to a Spanish mission along the Rio Grande to trade goods. He was arrested by a Spanish commander. He enjoyed his stay and later remarried the commander's stepdaughter. He was released to lead an expedition in East Texas to establish a bunch of missions. Alonso de Leon. Alonso was sent to explore the Rio Grande and Neches River. 3 years and 4 expeditions later, he found Fort St. Louis in ruins. He continued into East Texas and found the Catos, which he named Tejas. Leon liked the fertile soil and good climate and friendly people. So what you guys are going to do for an assignment, I want you guys to choose one of the famous people in Texas and go ahead and create a poster going more into detail on his life.